Voila! Hello viewers, welcome back to CoffeeChillTV and another one of my socio-economic, philosophic chats on CoffeeChillTV. And today folks, we're going to jump into the cesspool of expat life. More precisely, we're going to talk about the worst types of expats. Let's jump in. And folks, as I enjoy my flat white, full cream, extra hot, medium-sized coffee from the Crust Bakery at Kiwana Waters, let me share with you, as I like to do, the impetus. What had me thinking I might make this video today? Let me give you the backstory on my motivation in doing this vlog today. Voila! Folks, artificial intelligence, AI, it's all pervasive. It is omnipresent. It's a bit like living here in Australia, fluoride in the water. Whether you ask for it or not, whether you like it or you don't like it, you've got it. And so recently I jumped into Google search. I was watching TV, there was an ad break on, I wasn't interested in the advertisement. I just typed in worst types of expats. Thought to myself, I'll be interested in the list. I'm going to share with you the list according to Google AI search results. And I'm going to give you my take on these, according to Google AI, worst types of expatriates, expats. As always, folks, I'm going to be very interested. If you agree, disagree, would you expand? Would you prune the list? What's your take? But for now, just going to work through the list, the Google AI worst types of expats, and give you my perspectives. Come along with me on CoffeeChillTV. And of course, folks, don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you're feeling the vibe. Now, folks, I've had to close some windows and doors because of the rain. Heavy rain, guys. I was hoping to do a bit of a walkabout vlog today, but yeah, that's not going to happen. It's raining cats and dogs, and apparently it will for another couple of days here on the so-called Sunshine Coast. So it's a good opportunity for me to, go through this list. Google AI. Now, there are 6 worst type of expats in the Rogues Gallery, according to Google AI. All right, let's start with the first one. Okay, viewers, the first worst type of expat, according to this list, is the cultural imperialist superiorist. Oh, and underneath the headline, I'll read it direct, believes their home country's way of doing things is superior and constantly complains about or tries to change the local culture to match their own. The cultural imperialist superiorist. Let's get into this one. Okay, number 1, cultural superiority. Those imperialist, colonial attitudes in some expats. Yeah, I've met quite a few over the years. And here's the thing, they don't just try and change the locals, they also try to change other foreign expats who are not from their region of the planet. Okay, this is a legacy, I think, of the old, colonial days, where it was predominantly Central European countries, as well as the UK, of course, involved in empire building, and with building of empires came, attempts to change the culture. Now, some great cultural introductions, okay, and some not so great. So let me talk a little bit my experience dealing with these cultural superiorist expats. Okay, here's a couple of stories. Okay, folks, now I just mentioned Central Europe and the UK, but it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge that the old colonial attitudes are not limited to those parts of the planet. And of course, empire building and colonising, the Vikings, the conquistadors, okay, Japan in World War II, the Soviet Union post World War II, Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, okay. So in more recent times, there's been colonialism based on, expansion of certain religious ideologies as well as political ones. So hey, those colonial attitudes and colonising, it still happens up to this day. But when we talk about the colonialist, in my experience, we're talking about the expat whose mindset is still stuck in 1901. Okay, folks, so those superiority complex expats. I'm going to pick on sort of, I suppose, primarily two parts of the planet. I'm going to pick on Central Europe and I'm going to pick on Australia, Aussies, because we're not immune to, trying to colonise places culturally, economically as well. So I'll get into those two. Let's start with the Europeans. So folks, Eurocentric, it's a portmanteau. It's a compound noun, it's a blended word, adjective, noun, Eurocentrism. The Eurocentric expat, he or she sees the world through a certain prism, okay? They see European culture and wisdom, just customs, the way things are done and seen and spoken of, as preeminent in this world. And I've got a couple of little war stories that kind of bring that home. Folks, Eurocentric. So here's a classic example. A couple of years ago in Udon Thani, Thailand, and I was having a coffee with an informal group of expats. There's one gentleman there from the Netherlands, and I mentioned him that I was going out that night to watch football at the sports bar in Udon Thani. He said, I don't understand this. I went into the sports bar last week. They said they were playing football, but I didn't see any football. What do you mean? I said they show rugby union football, rugby league football, and Australian rules football. He said, this is not football. I said, what do you mean, soccer? And a vein popped out of his forehead. For some Eurocentrics, I'm going to say they're bigots, a lot of them, Eurocentric bigots, the word soccer triggers them. I want to control the language. Don't call it soccer. Now, of course, I'm a retired English teacher, and I know that football is a collective pronoun, and under the umbrella of football, there are many codes. Australian rules football, rugby union football, rugby league football, American football, Irish football, Gaelic football. So, if you want to force people to only use the word football as pertains to soccer, You're a Eurocentric expat. Get over yourself, okay? You don't own the language. Don't force that onto others. Just chill out a bit. Okay, so another little war story. I went to Le for the first time last year, and I went to a pub in Le, the Saloon Bar. It's a great pub, great staff, great locals. But I had the unfortunate experience of meeting this German gentleman, and when I told him I was from Australia, he went, "Australian? Caveman." Wow. Wow. But superiority. Okay. Those of us from the Antipodes, we're not as worldly and wise and as well educated, surely, as folks from the part of the planet where he was from. Not to say that I don't understand why some people may have that misguided belief, that stereotype, that prejudice, but it is certainly, there. And whilst we're talking about Australians, I'm an equal opportunity critique master on this channel. I remember going to Bali a few years ago, and I overheard a conversation from an American gentleman. I was in just a food court, and he was talking to someone else, and he was saying, it's no good cooter at night. The Australians have taken over. Fair call, fair call. I remember much earlier than that in London, Earl's Court, Australians calling it Kangaroo Valley, as if we'd colonised, reverse colonised, back to the UK. And then finally, I had the displeasure of meeting an Australian expat when I was in Bangkok a few years ago, and we're just having a beer, and he was telling war stories, and he was complaining about the locals, and he used a derogatory term from the animal kingdom, which I won't use here, but it's really disappointing. And then he started banging on about time. Now, folks, people talk about Filipino time, Thai time, okay, and other concepts of time. And different parts of the world, have different attitudes to time. We know that, okay? In Thailand, some things take a little bit longer. And it's not up to me to impose my will on the local Thai people. I've watched a few vloggers in the Philippines. I'm going to be in the Philippines, so I'm really looking forward to going. And they warned Americans, don't impose your attitudes to time on the locals. Maybe embrace it a little bit. In one of my earlier videos, I talked about, what has travel taught me? And one of the things is patience. Okay? Patience. Punctuality, tardiness, okay. Particularly if you're a retired expat. And if you're not in a huge hurry, should you impose your attitudes on time on the locals? If you are, maybe you're being a little bit of a superiority complex person who's imposing on the locals. Hey, embrace the culture. You don't have to agree with every aspect of it, but just go with the flow. The old cliche, folks. When in Rome, do as the Romans. Okay, folks, the rain's died down a little bit, which is nice as we gaze out into suburban bliss, suburbia on the Sunshine Coast. What's next on the list? Well, according to Google AI search, the complainer. And the subtext, the complainer focuses solely on the negatives of their host country, constantly comparing it unfavourably to back home. All right, folks, the constant complainer. I ran into an old mate just by accident the other day, and I said to him, I said, hey, I'm thinking about making this video about the worst types of expats. And I said to him, well, what's the worst type in your opinion? He said, oh, easy. The whinger, the complainer, the constant complainer. Now, in two of my earlier videos, one on social media trolls, vexpats, and one on the expat bubble. Another one I dealt also onto this topic of whingers and whiners amongst expats was my expat life, full-time versus part-time vlog. So I've touched on this subject earlier, but a little bit of a deeper dive today. Yes, I need to get a little jigger, don't I? This channel is very low tech. It's the way maybe vlogging used to be. Okay, improvements will be coming in the future, folks, but thank you for your custom in the meantime. So the constant complainer, the whinger. Now, I first came across this concept when I was in primary school. When I was in primary school, I learnt the term whingeing pom. I remember watching a special on the ABC, the national broadcaster, about it, and it had these British expats living in Australia, and they were complaining about things like, why aren't the supermarkets open on the weekend? Now we're talking 1970s, folks, early 70s when I first learnt this term. It's different in Australia now, but why is that? Constantly complaining about things like that can be, a drama. Money. Money is a constant source of angst, and it's always curious for me. Sometimes I'll find myself in a circle of bitter and twisted vexed pats, vexed expatriates, whinging about money. It's funny how a retired baller maker becomes an expert on global currencies in retirement. It's funny how a retired nurse becomes an expert in geopolitics in retirement. It's funny how, a retired school teacher becomes an expert on inflation. Okay, folks, we're going to talk a little bit more about experts later, but tied into false senses of expertise is whinging and whining. So folks, whinging and whining. So it's been raining today, and many would know the old cliche, only happy when it rains. Okay, and the other one, the glass half empty, the whinger, the glass half full, the optimist. All right, these folks are very easy to spot. Okay, often you didn't ask for the conversation. They'll just be sitting next to you in a bar, a coffee shop, in a departure lounge at a terminal, and they'll be this and this and that. I'm just like, it's crazy. Now I mentioned vexed because they are vexed, because as much as they bag their adopted countries, they're also brutal in regards their homeland. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they've got the old rose-tinted glasses on, you know, when they look back at their homeland. And that first point about the cultural superiority complex can run true as well. But yeah, look, these folks will find any excuse to complain about the most trivial things. And if you try to swing the conversation around to what's good about their current locale, they'll say, yes, but. Yes, but. So folks, these people can steal the oxygen out of a room, and, you know, unless you want to be dragged down into their cesspool of negativity, get away from negative energy if you can. All right, get away from negative energy if you can. Okay, folks, thank you for keeping up with us so far today. And the next one on this list, according to Google AI search results, the perpetual tourist. And the subtext: the perpetual tourist lives in a country for years without learning the local language, adopting the culture, or making local friends. They exist only within the expat bubble. All right, folks. Mr. Perpetual Motion. Ms. Perpetual Motion. The perpetual tourist. So, yes, I dug quite deep into this concept of the expat bubble in one of my earlier videos, and at the end of this vlog on YouTube, there'll be a thumbnail. You can click on that and watch it. If you're watching on Rumble, just go back a couple of pages in the back catalogue and you'll find my video, Escaping the Expat Bubble. And, you know, the problem of being stuck in an expat bubble, you know, you just don't broaden your mind, and you have to ask yourself, why did you bother going? Now, I met an expat a couple of years ago. He was a complainer. Okay, he was a complainer, and he was banging on, whinging about this and that. And I said, well, why are you still here? Why are you still in Thailand? Why don't you go home? He's from the UK, this guy. And he said, it's the weather, Dave. I ain't buying it. I'm not buying it. It ain't just about the weather. Okay. And this guy, classic expat bubble syndrome. Okay. He had a very, I'd say borderline racist view of the locals. And yet, you know, he was still in Thailand. One of the problems was he's in an echo chamber. And in that expat bubble echo chamber, other expats will reconfirm his existing prejudices. Okay, his false view of the world is reconfirmed inside the bubble. Inside the bubble. Another issue with the expat bubble. Okay, another issue with the perpetual tourist who just hangs out with other tourists and expatriates is they often fail to appreciate the nature of expat living. Moreover, so-called friendships in the expat world. Now, I've lived as an expat in different locations and in different guises over a long period of time. And I'm going to say that I've observed that in the expat world, when it comes to so-called friendships, it's kind of transient, it's superficial, it's opportunistic, a little bit disingenuous. So if you're a perpetual tourist who is stuck in an expat bubble, you may find out the hard way that people you felt were your friends, at best, fair weather friends. Okay, why are you so scared to get to know some of the locals? Would it be so hard to learn just half a dozen words or more in the local language? Would it be so tough? Really? Why did you bother to travel 10,000 miles just to live in a bubble? Interesting one, isn't it? Alrighty ho. We're working our way down the list and we're up to number 4. The entitled Expats. And let's read subtext. The entitled Expats expects special treatment due to their passport or economic status, often treating local service staff with disrespect. Entitled Expats. I've got a couple of stories for you. One that sort of went viral on social media last year. There was a video, there was an Israeli tourist in Thailand, and in this video this person was acting obnoxious and basically said, well, we pay for you. And I suppose there was an inference there as regards to foreign investment, foreign aid, entitled behaviour. So this tourist from Israel, she felt she was entitled to be maybe particularly difficult as a customer, rude to the service staff. I'll try to find that vlog or information about it and put it in the and backfill it into this video. But that classic example of where I'm from, as if where you're from makes you any better or worse than anyone else. All right, folks, we're coming down the home straight. We've got 2 to go. Here's the second last one in the rogues gallery. It is the expert expats. Subtext. The expert expats arrives with no local knowledge, but acts as an expert on local politics, economics and culture, dismissing the views of the actual residents. Okay, folks, the 5-minute expert expat. Interestingly, I reckon you find more of these online. You will come up against them in real life as well, but yeah, online doing this sort of stuff. And part of my motivation in I suppose expanding the content on this channel was in response to these fake 5-minute expert, well, they're not experts, expats. Johnny come lately, just arrived, and all of a sudden instant expertise. Let me give you a couple of stories. Okay, folks, phony experts. I had the displeasure earlier this year of watching a vlog. I don't even know how I ended up watching it. It just came up in the feed. A young female American who's just moved to Bangkok. She's been there for about 4 weeks, and she's making qualitative judgments about the people in the place, locals as well as fellow expats. She made this really curious comment. She said, I was quite intimidated seeing older Western gentlemen with younger Thai ladies. A little bit sexist on her behalf, as well as completely ignorant. So you've just arrived from America and you've been in Bangkok for a few weeks, and suddenly you're an expert on relationships, between locals and expats in Thailand. Of course, there's extreme hypocrisy in this as well, because if you go up to Chiang Mai, you'll see older Western ladies with younger Thai men. Go to Seminac in Bali, you'll find heaps of sugar mamas, passport sisters, and good luck to them in the company of younger Balinese, Indonesian men. Not to forget Turkey and the Bahamas, certain parts of Africa. I could go on. Siem Reap, Cambodia. The point I'm trying to make is this so-called expat vlogger has been in Bangkok for a few weeks and all of a sudden casting aspersions, making judgments, pretending to have some deep insight into romantic relationships in the Kingdom of Thailand. What a hoax. What a fraud. And whilst we're sticking to the fake experts and online activity, digital nomads. Okay, there are some legit ones out there, good people. Sometimes I think the term itself is a little bit pretentious. I could even call myself a digital nomad, though I make no money from doing this. But yeah, the digital nomad I find really obnoxious is the fake expert on local economics. So, you know, on Facebook, in the comments section, where someone's talking about currency movements, and some expat will jump on with his misguided views on the background of why the Thai baht is this, why is the Filipino peso here, the US dollar is overpriced compared to the Malaysian ringgit. Says you. says you, the retired landscape gardener. Hey, nothing wrong with being a landscape gardener, but it doesn't make you an expert on global economics, on currency geo arbitrage. Okay, politics is even worse. Politics is even worse. Why would you get involved in local politics if you're an expat? If you're just an expat. Now, if you go on to get full residence and citizenship and you're in a country where you can vote, you got some skin in the game. But if you're an expat in a country where you have to do annual renewals or every few years or whatever it is, and you have no special rights to participate in the democratic process, why are you so keen to get involved in local geopolitics? And do you really understand it? Okay, you say, you'll often hear these expats say, oh, the corruption in this country is off the chart. Maybe it is. What about your country, where you're from originally? No corruption? Don't throw stones from a glass house. Don't be that pot calling the kettle black. Think about where you're from. Is it so perfect? Once again, those rose-tinted glasses that a lot of expats wear. And the last point I'll make on this, in regards, you know, these people who want to become experts, and they're not experts at all, they're absolutely kidding themselves, is why? I watched a vlog last year, really good one from America, and this vlogger was saying, you know, politics and retirement. When you're retired and you're no longer in the corporate world, you're kind of free from the shackles, you can get politically motivated if you want to. And this guy was saying, yeah, but is it worth it? Do you lose friendships? Do you alienate people for the sake of being active in politics? Now, he was just talking generally as retirees based in America. It's even more accentuated if you go overseas. For the sake of being involved in local politics as a expert, but you're not an expert. You're absolutely kidding yourself. You're a hoax. You're a fraud. Your expertise is a joke. It doesn't exist. What have you lost? What have you lost? You alienate people. In certain countries, of course, if you get involved in politics locally, that can have more deeper and serious implications than just alienating people. So, yeah, guys, forget being an expert on the local geopolitical, cultural, socio-economics. If you're not, know your limitations, but more importantly, be aware of the consequences. I think just let it go. Stop trying to pretend to be an expert when you're not. All right, viewers, lucky last in this rogues gallery of awful expats. The exploitative type. The exploitative type takes advantage of lower cost of living to live a life of luxury while ignoring the struggles of the local population or violating local laws and customs. All right, the exploitative type. Oh, there's some disgusting individuals in this last category of awful expats. You know, there's a lot being written and said, recorded in regards the dreaded cheap Charlie. And you know, the cheap Charlie will, you know, exploit the good nature of locals in certain communities, you know, for their own pocket, okay? And a lot of these cheap Charlies are not broke. They're just dreadful people. They're just dreadful people. We can go a step beyond the cheapskates and the penny pinchers. Yeah, beyond just being a penny pincher, a cheapskate, a cheap Charlie, some expats exploit the good nature of their hosts. Okay, they're in a country where, you know, people like to help. They're in a country where there's a high level of trust. They're in a country where people are restrained. Okay, and they take advantage of that. They take advantage of that. You know, the good nature of the locals is exploited by the bad nature of the expat. A lot of these expats, they were not raised right. There were parenting fails in their upbringing, and you know, they are sociopaths. Okay, they don't bat an eyelid when it comes time to being exploitative of the locals. And I'm going to give you an example of this in a practical sense. So folks, you know, an example, it's going back quite a few years ago now. I think it was way back in 2019, and I was in Jomtien having breakfast, and I saw this older expat lady come by, and right where I was having breakfast, she took bottled water and fresh fruit from the shrine. I just shook my head, and I looked at this other guy where we were both having breakfast, and he said, oh, she does it all the time. Yeah, look, another example, this time online. It was a few years ago now. There was this vlogger who went into some 5-star hotel in Bangkok, helped himself to the breakfast buffet, didn't pay for it, and then bragged about it online. Once again, exploiting the local suppose, propensity for trust. Okay? And then he bragged about it. Now, once again, a lot of these individuals, they're not broke. Okay? They're just exploiting the local situation to, do a disservice to the locals. In effect, they are stealing profit from the locals. A final example. So a final example, folks. In Thailand, many of you would know, there's the check bin. This is not a check bin, this is an empty coffee cup. But the check bin, it's very much a trust exercise, And people, you go to a bar and you put money in the check bin, and unfortunately, a lot of exploitative expats, they dine and dash. They do a runner. I wonder, what's the future of the check bin? Does it have a shelf life, the check bin? Really, there's such a level of trust there that, Now, some of you may jump in and go, yeah, but what about when it's round the other way? Check bin filling. I've been exploited as a farang, as an expat. I had my check bin filled once at a place. So, hey, no one's perfect. No one's lily white, okay? And, I suppose I was being exploited as an expat, as well. So it does cut both ways, but more often it's the exploitative expat who, does the dine and dash, does the runner, And a final example. Okay, folks, a final example. I mentioned before taking profit. Okay? I will see expats who, they've been around a while, and, these are these expert expats. You tell them, I paid, $10 for this Hawaiian shirt. You paid too much. I thought it was a fair price. I thought it was a win-win. There's some profit for the local vendor and a good deal for me. But these exploitative expats, they'll pay $9. They won't budge. They'll steal the profit from someone, who's struggling to pay the rent and feed their kids. And they feel very good about themselves. I think, I'm exploiting. Guys, you can be frugal in a sensible way. You can be frugal in a totally atrocious, exploitative way. And with a lot of long-term expats, they kind of work that system, and they do themselves a disservice. Two-tier pricing is a controversial issue all around the world. I first came across it in China in 1993 when I was backpacking, and I had to use FEC, foreign exchange currency. I wasn't even allowed to use the local renminbi, and I always paid extra. Okay, well, I didn't have to go to China. You see these expats in places like Thailand, and I won't go to that museum because it's going to cost me $5 to go in, and it's free for the locals. If your economic world falls over $5, you're kidding yourself, right? Let the locals have a little bit of profit. Convert it back to your own currency, okay? That doesn't mean you become spendthrift, okay, and you just spray your money around all right? But, you know, come on. Don't exploit the locals. You know, in a lot of cases, people like me, I won the lottery. I was born and bred in Australia with great parents. You know, I worked hard in my career to establish myself, but, you know, I'm very lucky, okay? If I was born and bred in some other parts of the world, the economic disequilibrium would go against me. So I'm not here to be gullible. I'm not here to be exploited myself, but a fair price, you know. Don't be so hardcore on trying to screw the locals on price, you know, just for the sake of your own puffed up sense of hubris. And point one, superiority. Hey, go for those win-win negotiations. You know, it doesn't have to be win-lose. You know, don't be exploitative as an expat. All right, viewers, let me run the tape on the rogues gallery of the 6 worst types of expats according to my Google AI search, and I'm also going to throw in a quote from the search result as well. All right, here we go. Number 1, the cultural imperialist superiorist. Number 2, the complainer, followed by the perpetual tourist. Number 4, the entitled expats. Number 5, the expert expats. And finally, the exploitative type. Yeah, and why is it important, if you are an expat or you're considering becoming an expat, to be cognizant of your own behaviour? Well, according to the Google AI search, and I quote, these types often contribute to negative stereotypes of expats and can hinder positive, respectful and mutually beneficial relationships with the host community. And I suppose just to add my take on the importance of understanding one's behaviour as an expat, think about the housed guest analogy. You visit a friend's place. Are you a good guest or a bad one? Okay, chances are if you're living as an expat and you haven't obtained permanent resident citizenship, you are only a guest in this country. Be a good guest. All right, viewers, thank you so much for watching this video. It's a wrap, and hey, what about you? What do you reckon about that list? Are all of the inclusions on point? Would you prune the list? Would you expand? Don't be afraid to opine and give your take on so-called awful expats. If you do, please keep it classy. But most importantly, thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you again soon on CoffeeChillTV. All the best.